The screen screamed launch. Not a drill, not a test, a confirmed nuclear launch from the United States. The system updated, a second missile, a third, a fourth, a fifth, all heading straight for the Soviet Union. Every protocol, every drill, every fiber of military training screamed one thing: retaliate, launch the counterstrike, end the world. But Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov did nothing. He picked up the phone to his superiors, and with the fate of humanity in his hands, he told a lie. To understand the pressure in that room, you have to understand the year, 1983. The Cold War wasn't just cold, it was freezing, brittle, ready to shatter. Ronald Reagan had labeled the Soviet Union the evil empire, promising to leave it on the ash heap of history. The Soviets were bogged down in a brutal war in Afghanistan, and just 3 weeks before this night, a Soviet fighter jet had shot down a civilian airliner, Korean Airlines Flight 007, killing all 269 people aboard, including a U.S. congressman. The world was a tinderbox. Both sides were paranoid, jumpy, their fingers hovering over the button. The United States was running aggressive military exercises like Able Archer 83, designed to simulate a nuclear attack, terrifying Soviet leadership who feared it was a cover for a real first strike. This wasn't a world of diplomacy, it was a world of mutually assured destruction, and destruction felt more assured than ever. The story of how one man's gut feeling pulled us back from that brink is a stark reminder of how close we came. If you believe these forgotten moments in history need to be told, make sure you're subscribed. Deep underground, buried beneath layers of earth and concrete, was the nerve center of the Soviet Union's nuclear defense, the Serpukhov 15 command bunker. This was the brain. Its job was to watch the sky, not with radar, which could only see missiles after they'd crested the horizon, but with satellites, a brand new cutting-edge system called Oko, the Russian word for eye. This system was meant to give the Kremlin a precious 10-minute head start, the time needed to launch a devastating counterattack before the first American warheads hit. Inside this concrete tomb, 200 military personnel monitored the data. But on this particular night, September 26, 1983, the man in the commander's chair was Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, and he wasn't who you'd expect to hold the world's fate in his hands. Petrov wasn't a career soldier from the front lines. He was a scientist, an engineer. His job was to analyze data, to understand the complex workings of the Oko system, not just to follow orders blindly. He knew its strengths, but more importantly, he knew its weaknesses. He had helped write the software. He understood its logic. He was a thinker, a problem solver. His own colleagues described him as having a mind of his own, someone who wasn't afraid to question things. This was not a quality the rigid Soviet military typically encouraged, but on this night, it would prove to be the most important quality in the world. He had taken the shift as a favor for a sick colleague, a simple twist of fate that placed a man of logic, not just loyalty, in the hot seat when the unthinkable happened. The Oko system was a technological marvel, but it was also brand new and barely tested. It relied on 4 satellites placed in a peculiar, highly elliptical orbit called a Molniya orbit. This path allowed them to soar high over the northern hemisphere, giving them a perfect, lingering view of the American ICBM silos in places like Montana and North Dakota. The satellites weren't looking for the missiles themselves. They were looking for the immense plume of infrared energy, the fiery tail of a rocket engine igniting against the cold backdrop of space. The system was designed to be foolproof. Computers would detect the launch, cross-reference it with other sensors, and deliver a simple, unambiguous warning. a warning that left no room for interpretation, a warning that demanded one and only one response. The shift had begun like any other. The low hum of electronics was the only sound. The air was stale, recycled. The faces of the men were illuminated by the green glow of their monitors. For hours, nothing happened. The world outside the bunker went about its business, completely unaware that its continued existence depended on the quiet diligence of these men. Petrov oversaw his team, ensuring the systems were running smoothly. It was routine. It was monotonous. The calm before a storm no one could ever truly prepare for. The clock ticked past midnight. It was officially the 26th of September. At 40 minutes past the hour, that calm was shattered forever. A siren split the air, not a subtle beep, but a deafening, soul-shaking wail. Every light on the main console flashed red, and there it was, in bold, stark Cyrillic letters, Pusk, launch. The system, the brand new billion-ruble eye in the sky, was reporting a missile launch from a US base. The protocol was rigid. Petrov had 3 minutes to assess the threat and report up the chain of command to General Secretary Yuri Andropov. The system's confidence level for the launch was highest. For a moment, the room was frozen in disbelief. This was it, the moment they had trained for, the moment they had dreaded. The end of the world had begun with a single word on a screen. Before anyone could even process the first missile, the system updated. Another launch detected, and another, and another. Within a minute, the map showed 5 Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missiles screaming out of their silos, arcing across the globe. The electronic map was a spiderweb of death, aimed directly at the heart of the Soviet Union. The noise in the room was immense. The siren, the shouting of his subordinates demanding confirmation, the frantic clicking of keyboards. All eyes were on Petrov. His training told him this was real. The computer, which was designed to be infallible, was telling him this was real. 5 missiles from a single base. It was a textbook limited strike. His duty was clear. Soviet nuclear doctrine was called launch on warning. It was a brutal, simple calculus. Because the US missiles were geographically closer, they would strike first. The only way to ensure a retaliatory strike was to launch the moment an attack was detected, before your own missiles were destroyed in their silos. There was no time for deliberation, no time for a phone call to the American president. You trust the system and you launch everything. Petrov's job was not to decide if the world should end. His job was to confirm the data and pass it up the chain. From there, the decision to launch would be made in minutes. He was just one cog in a machine of annihilation. But this one cog was about to jam the entire machine. Amid the panic, a thought began to needle at Petrov's analytical mind. 5 missiles. Why only 5? A real first strike, a genuine attempt to decapitate the Soviet Union, wouldn't be 5 missiles. It would be hundreds. It would be thousands. It would be an all-out assault from every silo, every submarine, every bomber. You don't start a nuclear war with a poke. You start it with a sledgehammer. This felt wrong. It was illogical. It didn't fit any of the war game scenarios they had practiced. It was too small, too neat. This was the first crack in the system's perfect certainty. It was a flicker of human intuition against the cold, hard logic of the machine. He needed more data. He turned away from the main warning screen and started digging into the raw system logs. He was looking for corroboration, anything to support this apocalyptic data. He checked the other satellites. They saw nothing. He yelled at the operators for the ground-based radar, the long-range systems that should be picking up the missiles as they came over the horizon. Their screens were blank. Nothing. Zero. The computer was screaming that the sky was falling, but every other instrument was silent. This was the contradiction. The infallible Oko system was saying one thing, and everything else was saying another. Who do you trust? The new, buggy machine, or the tried and true methods? And then his engineer's brain kicked in. He remembered the briefings about the Oko system's potential flaws. He knew the satellite's orbit, and he knew the location of the supposed launch. He did a quick mental calculation. The sun's position relative to the satellite and the American missile fields. It was a unique alignment. Was it possible? Could the satellite's sensors mistake the reflection of the sun off the tops of high-altitude clouds for the fiery plume of a missile engine? It was a 1 in a million chance, a freak cosmic coincidence, but it was a plausible explanation. It was a reason for the machine to be wrong, and in that moment, a reason was all he needed. The red phone on his desk was a direct line to the top brass of the Soviet Air Defense Forces. They were waiting. Every second he delayed was a second lost from their response time. His men were screaming at him to report the launch. The system was blinking highest confidence. He was holding the fate of the world in a sweaty palm, his finger hovering over the button to dial. He knew what he was supposed to say. I confirm an incoming nuclear strike. It was the safe choice, the choice that followed orders, the choice that absolved him of responsibility. But he couldn't do it. He took a breath, lifted the receiver, and made the call that would define his life and seal the fate of the world. With the calmest voice he could muster, Stanislav Petrov reported up the chain of command. But he didn't report a missile attack. He reported a system malfunction. He told his superiors that the Oko early warning system was sending false data. He was, in effect, calling his own billion-ruble system a liar. On the other end of the line, the general was incredulous. How could he know? The system was designed to be perfect. Petrov held his ground. I have a gut feeling, he would later say. I just didn't want to be the one to start World War III. He was staking the lives of every person on the planet on his intuition. He was disobeying the most fundamental order a soldier can receive. His decision wasn't a single moment of bravery, it was a continuous battle. After the call, he had to control his own men. They were soldiers, trained to react. They saw the screens he did, and they thought their commander was insane. He had to yell, to assert his authority, to force them to continue their checks and ignore the blaring alarms that insisted Armageddon was minutes away. He had to project absolute certainty at a moment when he was anything but certain. He was walking a tightrope over an abyss, and the slightest misstep would plunge everyone into the fire. Now came the worst part, the wait. If he was wrong, the first American warheads would begin to detonate on Soviet soil in about 20 minutes. Every tick of the clock was a hammer blow. 10 minutes passed. The silence in the room was heavier than the concrete above them. 15 minutes. He had bet everything on a hunch, on a theory about sunlight and clouds. If he was wrong, his lie wouldn't have just doomed him, it would have doomed his country, and possibly the entire northern hemisphere. The men in the room could do nothing but stare at the clock, waiting to see if they would live or die. The trajectories on the screen showed the missiles were just minutes from impact. The moment of projected impact came and went. Silence. No explosions, no seismic alerts, no brilliant flashes of light from the east. The ground-based radar, which by now should have been screaming with its own warnings, remained stubbornly, beautifully silent. The missiles weren't there. They had never been there. Petrov was right. His gut feeling, his logical deduction had been correct. The most sophisticated warning system on Earth had been fooled by a trick of the light. The world was not ending. Not tonight. You might expect Stanislav Petrov to be hailed as a hero. He wasn't. In the days that followed, he was subjected to intense interrogation. His superiors were furious, not because he had almost allowed a nuclear war to start, but because his actions had revealed the deep, embarrassing flaws in their multi-billion ruble system. He had exposed their prized eye in the sky as unreliable. And in the rigid, blame-oriented culture of the Soviet military, that was a cardinal sin. He hadn't followed protocol. He had used his own judgment, and for that, he could not be rewarded. They couldn't officially punish him for preventing World War III, so they punished him for a technicality. They reprimanded him for failing to correctly fill out the duty logbook during the crisis. It was a petty, bureaucratic slap in the face. His career was effectively over. He was reassigned to a less sensitive post, and within a year, he took early retirement due to a nervous breakdown. He left the military not as a savior, but as a failure in the eyes of his commanders. The man who saved the world was sent home in disgrace. For over a decade, the incident was buried. It was classified top secret, a skeleton in the Kremlin's closet. The world continued on, blissfully unaware of how close it had come to annihilation on a quiet September night. The Cold War eventually ended, the Berlin Wall fell, and the Soviet Union dissolved. Stanislav Petrov lived in obscurity in a small apartment near Moscow, his pension barely enough to survive. He told no one. It was a state secret, and he was a man of his word. The single most important decision in human history remained completely unknown. The story only came to light in 1998. Petrov's former commander, General Yuri Votintsev, published his memoirs. In them, he mentioned the 1983 incident, praising the cool-headed judgment of the officer on duty that night. A German political activist read the account and became obsessed, tracking down Petrov to his small apartment. He flew to Moscow, interviewed the reluctant hero, and brought the story to the Western press. Suddenly, after 15 years of silence, the world learned the name of the man who had saved it. The world reacted with awe and gratitude. He was flown to New York to be honored at the United Nations. He received the Dresden Peace Prize. He became the subject of documentaries and books. But through it all, Petrov remained deeply humble, almost dismissive of his own actions. He never saw himself as a hero. "That was my job," he would say, "but they were lucky it was me on shift that night." He insisted that any professional would have done the same, though history suggests that's far from certain. He was a quiet man, thrust onto the world stage for a decision he made in a dark room decades earlier. And what was the United States doing during all of this? Absolutely nothing. It was the middle of the night. The missile silos in Montana were quiet. The U.S. military was at a normal state of readiness. There was no attack. There was no threat. The entire crisis, an event that brought humanity to the razor's edge of extinction, was a ghost. A phantom created by the sun, a faulty computer program, and a world primed for war. It was a war that existed for 23 terrifying minutes, only inside the concrete walls of Serpukhov 15. Petrov's story is more than just a historical anecdote. It's a terrifying lesson about the systems we build and the blind faith we place in them. We've created automated systems of warfare, capable of acting at speeds beyond human comprehension, all in the name of security. But these systems are built by fallible humans and can be fooled by something as simple as the weather. The incident reveals the terrifying truth that sometimes the only thing standing between us and automated annihilation is the gut feeling, the intuition, the doubt of a single human being in the chain. It begs the question,
In an age of AI and hypersonic missiles, will there even be time for a human to have a doubt?
Stanislav Petrov passed away in 2017 at the age of 77, still living in that same small apartment. He died in the same obscurity in which he had lived most of his life. He never asked for fame or fortune. He simply did his job, and in a critical moment, he allowed his humanity to override his programming. He wasn't a general or a politician. He was just the right man in the right place at the worst possible time. He faced the abyss and chose to take a step back. And for that, we all owe him a debt that can never be repaid. The ultimate question is, what would you have done in that chair, with the world's end blinking on your screen? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.